I'm a 29-year-old woman, about to get married to the love of my life, and everything's been going great. I've been planning this wedding for months with my fiancé 27F, and we were both super excited about it. The venue, the dress, the caterers, everything was falling into place. My family was on board, and we'd even managed to get a couple of the really difficult relatives to RSVP. I felt like everything was finally coming together after all the craziness leading up to it. But that was before I had the conversation with my dad 55M. We've always had a bit of a complicated relationship, to say the least. He's never been the emotional type, and growing up, he was always distant. He'd compare me to my older sister, who passed away when I was 16, and it was like I could never live up to her memory. After her death, things just never really got back to normal. My dad didn't know how to be a father without her, and I didn't know how to get his attention without feeling like I was taking her place. It's hard to explain, but it's like we've never really been on the same page. Anyway, when I told him about the wedding, his reaction was weird. He seemed happy, or at least he acted like it. There wasn't the excitement you'd expect, though. No, I'm so proud of you, or this is the happiest day of my life. It was more like he nodded, gave a vague smile, and just went on about his day. Typical dad stuff. A few weeks before the wedding, he called me. He told me he'd be bringing someone special with him, and that I should save a seat for her. At first, I thought he was talking about some new girlfriend, but no. He dropped a bombshell. He had adopted someone. A woman. In her late 20s, my age. Honestly, I didn't know how to process that. I didn't even know he'd been thinking about adopting anyone. I mean, we weren't exactly close, but if something like that had happened, I felt like I should have known. It felt odd, but I shrugged it off. Maybe it was just a phase. My dad was always doing these random things and then dropping them a few months later, so I thought, okay, whatever. But the closer we got to the wedding, the more things seemed to get strange. My dad was barely in touch. No calls, no updates, just radio silence. This was my big day, and he couldn't even check in. I thought that was a little off, but I was too wrapped up in the chaos of last-minute preparations to worry about it too much. Then came the day of the wedding. I had 1,000 things on my mind. The flower arrangements were running late, the caterer was calling me every 5 minutes, and my bridal party was scrambling to get everything together. My dad? Nowhere to be seen. Not a single call or text. The wedding was hours away, and I hadn't heard from him. But I didn't want to panic. I told myself he'd show up. He had to, right? The ceremony was about to start, and I was waiting in the back, trying to gather my thoughts, when I saw him. My dad walking in with this woman, the one he had adopted. I froze. My stomach dropped. But what really got to me was what happened next. My dad walked straight to the front of the room, right to where my sister's old seat was. My late sister, the one I could never live up to, the one who had always been in the spotlight, had her seat saved for special occasions. My dad had this seat reserved for her at family events, and it had been left empty ever since she passed away. But that day, he didn't just walk to the seat, he sat her down in it. The new daughter. Like it was nothing. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My heart was racing. What was going on? Was I seeing things? I walked up to my dad, trying to hold it together, but I could barely speak. I asked him, "What is this? Why is she sitting there?" And he said, with a straight face, "This is my daughter now. She's going to take your place." I don't think I've ever felt so blindsided in my life. My own father, in front of my entire family, was acting like I didn't matter anymore. Like I was the one who didn't belong at my own wedding. My fiancé looked at me with wide eyes. She was shocked too, and honestly, I think it hit her harder than me. She started pulling me aside, whispering that maybe we should just call the whole thing off. The tension in the room was unbearable. My family, who had been eagerly waiting for this day, was silent, just staring. Some were whispering, others were just frozen in disbelief. I could feel the weight of their judgment, their confusion. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't the only one who felt betrayed. My dad wasn't just causing drama, he was making a scene. He was making me choose between my family and my future, and I didn't know how to handle that. I wanted to go through with the wedding. I had planned this for months, but how could I? With my dad acting like this, with the chaos taking over the day, I didn't know what to do next. Update 1. The moment my dad walked in with his new daughter, I thought I was losing my mind. My wedding day, the day I'd been planning for months, was turning into a nightmare. I could hear the whispers around me, and all I could do was stand there, frozen. The worst part? I had to deal with my dad in front of everyone. I wasn't about to let this ruin everything, so I marched up to him. The anger, the confusion, it all boiled over as I approached him. "What is this? Why did you bring her here?" He barely looked at me, almost like he couldn't even be bothered to have a real conversation. "This is my new family now," he said. "You need to accept it." I didn't know what to say to that. Was he serious? He had no problem bringing this woman, who was my age, to take my place at my own wedding, and now he was acting like I should just roll with it. I kept pressing him, trying to understand why. Why today, of all days? Why did this have to happen at the one event I had spent months preparing for? But my dad didn't care. He told me he'd been looking for closure for years, and that this new daughter was the answer. Apparently, she filled the gap left by my late sister, who had passed away years ago. It didn't make any sense. Closure? By adopting a woman who looked so much like my sister, it felt more like he was trying to replace her, to somehow erase the past, like I didn't matter anymore. Meanwhile, the new daughter was acting like nothing was wrong. She kept calling me sweetie, acting all comforting, like I was the one overreacting. She even tried to put her arm around me at one point, telling me everything would be okay. It made me feel like I was losing my mind. She was playing the role of the caring, understanding stepdaughter, while I was standing there watching my father abandon me. It was surreal. I could feel the tension in the room, the uncomfortable silence as my family processed what was going on. On one side, my grandparents were furious. My mom's side was just as confused, unsure how to react. They were all upset that my dad would pull something like this, right in front of me, on the most important day of my life. But my dad, he was completely unfazed. I asked him again why he was doing this today. Why did he have to show up with her at my wedding in front of everyone? His response was typical of him. Just let it go, he said. It's time for you to accept this. This is my new family. It was like he couldn't even understand how wrong this was. Like he couldn't even see the hurt he was causing. I looked to my fiancée, hoping she would have some idea of what to do. She had been my rock through all of this, but even she was starting to question everything. She whispered to me, asking if we should just call off the wedding. It felt like a gut punch, hearing her say that, but she was right. How could we get married when my own father couldn't even respect me? I didn't want this to be the end of everything I'd worked for. I didn't want to let my dad's actions tear apart the future I had with my fiancé, but it was becoming clear that it might be too late to fix this. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I decided to postpone the wedding. My heart was pounding as I made the announcement, and I saw the disappointment in the eyes of our guests. They were all there waiting for the ceremony to begin, but it was impossible for me to go through with it under these circumstances. My fiancé and I needed time to figure things out. The last thing I wanted was to make a decision that would haunt us later. As I stepped away, trying to process everything, I could hear my dad in the background, telling everyone that family is what matters most. He didn't care about the wedding. He didn't care about what this meant for me. All that mattered to him was this new dynamic he had created, this new daughter who was now his priority. I left the room, needing to escape. My emotions were all over the place. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think straight. I ended up crying in the back room, feeling completely lost and abandoned. It was like I was invisible to my own father. The one person who should have been there for me, supporting me on the most important day of my life, had turned into a stranger. The wedding was officially postponed. I couldn't marry my fiancé under these circumstances. We couldn't move forward when my father had shattered any hope of family unity. The chaos he caused in that one moment was enough to make me question everything I had ever known about my family. The questions about my dad's motives, about why he would do this, were too big to ignore. I felt betrayed, but I knew I couldn't make any decisions in the heat of the moment. So, I decided to take a step back. I needed time to think about my future, about what I wanted, about what I was willing to accept. And if my dad couldn't respect that, then maybe it was time to cut ties with him. But for now, the wedding was off, and the emotional fallout had only just begun. Update 2. So after postponing the wedding, things didn't exactly calm down. If anything, they got even worse. The whole situation with my dad and his new daughter continued to spiral. It felt like no one really understood how deep this went, and my dad wasn't about to admit he'd done anything wrong. I tried to talk to him again. I needed answers. I wasn't going to let this slide. We needed to have a conversation about what had happened, and why he thought it was okay to show up with her and take my place. But when I sat down with him, he brushed me off again. He kept saying it was all just a misunderstanding and that I was being too sensitive. I couldn't believe it. Every time I tried to get a straight answer, he just deflected. His new daughter? She was still around, showing up at every family gathering like she had always been a part of the family. I couldn't escape her. She was everywhere, calling me sis like we had been close for years. She even started doing things that felt like she was trying to replace my late sister. She mimicked her style, wore the same kinds of clothes my sister had worn, and even picked up on the way she carried herself. It was unsettling. I wasn't the only one who noticed. My whole family started picking up on it too. But when I brought this up with my dad, he didn't care. He just kept defending himself, claiming that this was the only way he could move forward. He said he needed to find closure after my sister's death, and that adopting this woman, who by the way was my age, was the only thing that made sense to him. He had to fill the gap she left behind, he said. It felt like a slap in the face. My grandparents, on both sides, were furious. They couldn't understand how my dad could do something so disrespectful to me. How could he bring in someone so close to my age and act like I didn't exist? They were all talking behind his back, wondering what he was thinking. But my dad wasn't hearing it. To him, it was all justified. It didn't matter that he was tearing apart our family's foundation. He was just trying to move on from his grief. The tension in my own relationship with my fiancé was getting worse by the day. She started questioning if I was still the person she thought I was. If I couldn't stand up to my own father, how could we move forward as a couple? It was hard to hear, but I knew she had a point. She was angry at my dad, and honestly, she was starting to feel like she couldn't trust me. It was becoming clear that our relationship was on the line because of my dad's actions. Some family members were on my side, expressing their outrage at what my dad had done. They saw how wrong it was. But there were others who were more sympathetic to him, who thought I was overreacting, or that I should just understand that he was grieving. They couldn't see that it wasn't just about my dad's grief, it was about respect, boundaries, and my place in this family. It wasn't just my fiancé was pushing me to do something. Some of my friends even suggested therapy for me and my dad. They said it might help us work through everything. My fiancé was on board with this idea, but when I brought it up to my dad, he refused. He said he didn't need therapy. He didn't think anything was wrong with his actions. He made it clear that he was sticking to his decision and there was nothing to fix. As the days went by, the situation with his new daughter only became more bizarre. She started showing up at family events wearing the same clothes as my sister, using the same phrases, and even mimicking her gestures. It was like she was trying to take on the role of my late sister. Every time I saw her, I couldn't shake the feeling that my dad was trying to replace her, and that was exactly what he was doing, trying to replace me too. I started talking with my fiancé more about what to do next. Should I continue to try to make things work with my dad, or should I just walk away? My fiancé's patience was running out. She told me she wasn't sure if she could marry me if my dad kept disrespecting me like this. It felt like a breaking point. I wanted to be with her, but at the same time, I didn't know how to fix this family dynamic. How could I expect her to be okay with marrying into a family that was so divided, so broken? At this point, I knew I had to make a decision. My dad was never going to apologize for what he did. He might say he was sorry, but it was a half-hearted apology, as if he was just saying it to end the conversation. He told me he didn't realize how much his actions had hurt me, but still insisted that his new daughter was here to stay. He wasn't about to change, and I knew it. So it came down to a choice. Do I stand up for myself, or do I continue trying to salvage my relationship with a man who clearly didn't care? I didn't know if I was strong enough to cut him out of my life for good. But how could I continue pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't? The wedding was still on hold, and I was stuck in this strange limbo. The tension between me and my dad, between me and my fiancé, was growing by the day. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that whatever decision I made, it would change everything. And I had to figure out if it was worth fighting for the family that had already turned its back on me. Update 3. So, the wedding. It's officially off. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. After everything that happened, it was clear that I wasn't going to get married with my dad's behavior hanging over my head like a dark cloud. It wasn't just the shock of him showing up with his new daughter at my wedding. It was everything that came after. The lies, the manipulation, the constant gaslighting. It was all too much to ignore. I didn't want to call off the wedding. I had spent so much time, money, and energy planning for this day. But after that moment with my dad, I couldn't bring myself to go through with it. The relationship with my father had completely shattered. How could I marry someone knowing that my father didn't respect me? How could I pretend that everything was fine when it was so clearly not? Even after the wedding was canceled, my dad continued to act like nothing was wrong. He wouldn't acknowledge the hurt he'd caused. It was like he was living in his own world, where nothing had changed. He'd call and text, sending me messages like everything was fine, as if he hadn't just upended my life. I tried to confront him again, but he would just deflect or act like I was being dramatic. He refused to acknowledge that what he had done was wrong, that bringing this woman into our family and treating her like she was my sister had caused irreparable damage. As if that wasn't enough, my relationships with my other family members started to become strained. Some sided with me, seeing how disrespectful my dad's actions were, but others started blaming me. They said I should have handled the situation differently, that I should have tried harder to understand my dad's grief. It felt like I was stuck between two worlds, those who supported me and those who sided with my dad's actions. But at the end of the day, it was hard to ignore the fact that my dad was the one who had done the most damage, and I wasn't ready to forgive him. I decided to start therapy to help me process everything that had happened. I needed to understand why my dad had acted the way he did, and I needed to figure out how to deal with the fallout. The therapy sessions helped to some extent, but the more I talked about my dad's behavior, the more I began to realize how emotionally manipulative he had always been. It wasn't just this incident, it was years of him pushing me aside, comparing me to my late sister, and never truly being there for me. I was just now seeing it all clearly, and it was a tough pill to swallow. My fiancé, though, was starting to question everything. She felt betrayed by my dad, and even more than that, she was unsure if she could continue our relationship. She didn't feel like she could trust me anymore, especially since I hadn't stood up to my dad more forcefully. She was right to question everything. I had been so caught up in trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy with my dad that I had neglected the fact that my fiancé's feelings were just as important. She was starting to feel like she didn't want to marry into a family that was so divided and disrespectful. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to make things work with her, but how could I, when my family had become this toxic battleground? Then, my dad tried to make it all go away by giving me a family heirloom. It was a gesture, I suppose, to show that he was trying to make things right, but it felt so hollow. A piece of jewelry or a token wasn't going to fix this. This wasn't about material things, it was about respect. He had disrespected me and my fiancé, and no amount of gifts could undo that. I didn't even want the heirloom. To be honest, I felt insulted. It was like he was trying to buy my forgiveness instead of owning up to what he had done. Meanwhile, my extended family was taking sides. Some expressed their disappointment in my dad, understanding why I was upset, while others defended his actions, telling me I should be more understanding of his need for closure. It was exhausting hearing the same thing over and over. I just wanted someone to see things from my perspective, but it felt like no one truly understood what I was going through. And then there was the guilt trip. My dad started playing the victim, saying I wasn't being understanding of his grief. He told me I was being selfish for not seeing things his way. It made me feel like the villain, like I was the one causing all the drama. But no matter how hard I tried to make him see that this wasn't about his grief, he just couldn't understand. He kept guilt-tripping me about how hard it was for him to move on, and that I should be happy he had found someone who made him feel whole again. I wasn't sure what to do anymore. My fiancé and I tried couples therapy, but things were tense. The tension between me and my dad, and the pressure from my fiancé to choose between her and my family, were taking their toll on both of us. She wasn't sure she could continue with the wedding, and I wasn't sure I could ask her to. But every time I tried to make a decision, it felt like my dad was still pulling the strings, still making me feel like I was the one who had to fix everything. The new daughter's role in all of this was only growing. She continued to show up at family events, acting like she belonged there, slowly taking over the space my late sister had occupied. It felt like my dad was erasing the memory of my sister and replacing it with this woman. It was unsettling. I didn't know how to stop it, and every day it felt like my place in the family was slipping further away. At this point, I knew I had to make a decision. Did I cut ties with my dad for good, or did I accept him and his new family, flaws and all? I couldn't keep living in limbo, torn between my dad and my fiancé. Something had to give. But what? Update 4. The fallout from the wedding was far worse than I could have imagined. The drama from that day didn't just end when I called off the wedding, it spread throughout my entire family, and it felt like it was never going to stop. People started talking, gossiping behind my back, and soon enough, my family had split into two sides. Some supported me, seeing how wrong my dad's actions were. Others, though, sided with him, trying to justify his behavior because of his grief. The whole situation was like a never-ending storm, and I was stuck in the middle of it. As the weeks dragged on, things started to deteriorate further. My fiancé, who had stuck by me through all the chaos, reached her breaking point. The tension between my family and me, the constant stress, and my inability to fix the situation was too much for her. She told me that she couldn't live in this tension anymore. The idea of marrying into a family that had treated me so poorly was too much for her to handle. We broke up. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I loved her, and I still do. But when your own father treats you like you don't matter, when he replaces you with someone else, it changes everything. The relationship couldn't survive that. I thought this was supposed to be the happiest time of my life, but instead, it was the most painful. My dad didn't seem to grasp the damage he'd done. We had another private conversation where he tried to justify his actions. He kept saying that he had been grieving for years, and that this new daughter was filling the hole left by my late sister. He even suggested that I should be happy for him, that he had finally found a way to move forward. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like he was completely ignoring the fact that this was hurting me. He never even considered how his actions were affecting my life, my relationships, or my future. The more he tried to push this new daughter onto me, the more isolated I felt. I didn't know where I stood anymore. Did I still matter to him? Or was I just an afterthought? It felt like I was being replaced, that the daughter he had adopted was the one who mattered now, not me. And as much as I tried to keep the peace, I couldn't ignore that this was a situation I couldn't accept. This new daughter, too, was becoming more and more involved in the family. She was attending family events, showing up at holidays, and every time I saw her, I felt like my place in the family was slipping away. It wasn't just about her presence, it was about the way she was being treated like my sister, like she was the one who had always been a part of our family. My mom and stepmom reached out to me, both furious at my dad's actions. They couldn't understand how he could replace me like that, how he could bring this woman into our lives and act like she belonged. They both wanted to support me, but at the same time, they didn't want to get caught in the crossfire of my dad's manipulations. It was hard for them too, because they knew that standing up to him meant facing the full force of his anger. After a lot of back and forth, my dad finally agreed to therapy. But when we went, it was clear he wasn't open to changing. He was still wrapped up in his grief, still seeing everything through that lens. To him, I was just supposed to accept the new family he had created and move on. But no matter how hard I tried to explain that I couldn't just forget what had happened, he refused to see it. Therapy didn't fix anything. It felt like he was going through the motions, but he wasn't really interested in making things right. Friends and family had told me to cut my dad out of my life. They couldn't understand why I had allowed things to go this far, why I hadn't made the decision sooner to walk away. But it wasn't that easy. Cutting ties with your own father, no matter how toxic the relationship is, isn't something you do lightly. And so I kept trying to salvage what I could, but as the weeks went by, it became harder and harder to hold everything together. Then I reached my breaking point. A few weeks later, I had a complete emotional breakdown. I was lost. I didn't know who I could trust anymore. My family was divided, and the one person I thought I could always count on, my dad, was the person who had hurt me the most. I felt betrayed, isolated, and completely alone. I started distancing myself from my dad, emotionally and physically. I stopped taking his calls and stopped responding to his texts. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I knew I had to. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I needed space, time to figure out who I was outside of the chaos he had caused. Thankfully, my mom stepped in to help me process everything. She was heartbroken over my dad's behavior, and she encouraged me to focus on healing, to stop trying to fix the unfixable. She told me that sometimes you just have to walk away to protect yourself. And as much as I didn't want to admit it, I knew she was right. But my dad didn't take kindly to the emotional distance I was putting between us. He started getting angry with me, accusing me of not understanding his grief. He even called me selfish, saying I wasn't letting him move on. It was like he had no clue that it wasn't about his grief, it was about respect, boundaries, and my mental health. To make matters worse, the new daughter took things a step further. She messaged me, telling me I needed to get over it and accept her as part of the family. She even hinted at some new sibling dynamic she wanted us to embrace. That was the final straw for me. I couldn't continue pretending that everything was fine, especially when I had no place in a family that was so quick to replace me. I made my decision. I had to cut ties with my dad and his new daughter completely. As painful as it was, it felt like the only way to protect my own mental health and rebuild my life. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the only one that made sense. I couldn't keep living in a family that didn't respect me, and I couldn't continue pretending that everything would magically fix itself. For the first time in years, I was taking control of my own life, even if it meant walking away from the family I once knew. Update 5. It's been a few months since I made the decision to cut ties with my dad. The pain hasn't gone away, but deep down, I know it was the right decision. I wish things could have been different, but I had to choose my mental health and peace of mind over holding onto a relationship that was never really there for me. I've had time to reflect on everything that happened, and one thing that's become clear is that my dad's behavior wasn't new. Looking back, I can see how emotionally distant he's always been. Even as a child, I was always the second priority, with my late sister's memory always hovering over me like a shadow. But I never noticed how damaging that was until now. It's like I was always trying to earn his love and approval, even though he was never really capable of giving it to me. His actions these last few months, just put everything into perspective. During the wedding fiasco and the aftermath, my friends and extended family really stepped up for me. They've been a lifeline, supporting me when things got messy. They reassured me that I did the right thing by cutting my dad out of my life. It's hard to explain, but having people who truly understand and support you makes all the difference in the world. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't alone. Therapy has been a big part of my healing process. I've been working through the trauma of my dad's betrayal and trying to figure out how to move forward. One of the biggest lessons I'm learning is how to set boundaries with people, especially those who don't respect me. For years, I let my dad walk all over me, letting him manipulate me into thinking I wasn't worthy of love or respect. Now I'm learning to stop accepting that behavior from anyone, and it's empowering. Therapy has helped me realize that I don't have to prove myself to anyone. I'm enough just as I am. I haven't heard from my dad in months. A part of me wonders if he's tried to reach out through other means, but I've made the decision to stay firm in my choice to cut contact. He hasn't even apologized, and until he does, I can't let him back into my life. It's still hard to fully accept that my dad, the person who should have been there for me the most, chose to push me away. But I know that I'm doing the right thing. My ex-fiancé and I have no contact now. After everything with my dad and the way the wedding fell apart, our relationship couldn't survive. While I'll always care for her, I know now that it wasn't meant to be. She had her own struggles with my dad's behavior, and I can't blame her for not wanting to stay in a relationship that was tied up in so much pain. I can't hold on to what we had, but it doesn't make it any less difficult. We both needed different things, and that's okay. On a brighter note, I started dating again. It's been a slow process, but I'm taking my time. I'm cautious though. I don't want to bring someone into my life until I've worked through my own emotional baggage. I've realized that I need to take care of myself first before I can fully give myself to someone else. It's a new chapter for me, and I want to make sure I'm in the right place mentally and emotionally before jumping into anything serious. A few weeks ago, I received a message from my dad's new daughter. She tried to guilt trip me, saying I should make up with my dad and accept her as part of the family. I didn't respond. I can't keep letting other people try to force me into something I'm not ready for. It feels like she's trying to insert herself into my life in a way that isn't welcome, and I'm not going to pretend that everything is okay just to make her feel better. I'm starting to feel a sense of peace. For the first time in years, I'm focusing on building a life that doesn't depend on my family's approval. I don't need my dad's approval to live a happy life. I don't need to keep trying to fix a broken relationship that was never truly healthy to begin with. I'm carving out my own path, and while it's not always easy, it's mine. A few weeks ago, I got a letter from my dad. It was an apology of sorts, though it felt more like a last-ditch effort to get me to forgive him. He asked me to reconsider, to open up to him again. I haven't opened the letter. It feels like it's too little, too late. Maybe one day I'll read it, but right now, I don't feel like I'm ready to face it. My decision is final, and I don't think anything will change that. I've been spending a lot of time with my mom, stepdad, and extended family. They've been nothing but supportive, and I've realized that I'm not alone in this. They've helped me heal, and I'm so grateful for them. I don't need my dad's approval anymore because I know I have the love and support of the people who truly care about me. The weight of the past still lingers, though. I spent so many years trying to earn my dad's love, always hoping that one day he'd come around. Letting go of that hope is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But I'm getting there. I've learned a lot from this experience, mainly the importance of healthy boundaries, self-respect, and the courage to walk away from toxic relationships. Looking ahead, I'm focusing on creating the life I want. I may never have the father I dreamed of, but I'm learning to create my own family with the people who truly care about me. And that's enough for me. I've learned to love and respect myself, and I know that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. It's a new beginning, and I'm ready for whatever comes next.